Fixing what you can, facing what you can't. Dr. Eleanor Reyes stood at the window of her office, watching raindrops race down the glass. 20 years as a trauma surgeon had taught her about the stubborn resilience of the human body and its heartbreaking limitations. The conversation she'd just had with the Wilsons replayed in her mind, their hopeful faces crumbling as she explained that their son would never walk again. "There must be something else we can try," Mr. Wilson had pleaded, his voice breaking. "Some experimental treatment, some specialist." But Eleanor had told them the truth. Some injuries couldn't be undone, some damage was permanent. The bullet had severed James Wilson's spinal cord completely. Her colleague, Dr. Patel, slipped into the office with 2 cups of coffee. "That was rough," he said, offering her one. "You know, there are doctors who would have given them false hope, suggested expensive treatments that won't work just to soften the blow." Eleanor shook her head. "And when those treatments fail, then they've lost both their son's future and their savings." She took a sip of the bitter hospital coffee. "The truth gives them something solid to rebuild on." Later that evening, Eleanor drove to her other job, a free clinic in the city's most troubled neighborhood. Here, she treated wounds that went beyond the physical. Children living with violence, elderly patients abandoned by family, young men trapped in cycles of retaliation. Tonight, she was meeting with Darius, a 16-year-old who had been brought in 3 months ago with a gunshot wound, the third young man she'd treated that week with the same injury. Unlike James Wilson, Darius could still walk, but his right arm would never regain full function. "I don't see the point of these sessions," Darius muttered when she entered the small counseling room. "My arm is what it is." "These aren't about your arm," Eleanor replied, setting down her notepad. "They're about everything else." Over the weeks, she had discovered that Darius lived with his grandmother, that his father was in prison, that he was failing school, and that he had been running with a crew seeking revenge for his cousin's death. "I can't fix your arm," she had told him during their first session, "but there are other things we can fix. And there are things we can't fix but must face honestly if you're going to have any kind of future." Tonight, Darius seemed different, less defiant, more thoughtful. "My grandmother found this," he said, pulling a gun from his backpack and placing it on the table between them. Eleanor's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Were you planning to use it?" "The guys who shot me are out there walking around like nothing happened," he said, his voice tight with anger. "They took my future." "Did they?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Or have you decided to let a damaged arm become a damaged life?" Their eyes locked across the table. "What exactly can't be fixed here, Darius?" "Your arm can't be fully restored. That's true. But everything else, your education, your safety, your freedom, your grandmother's peace of mind, all of that is still fixable." Silence stretched between them. "Unless you use that gun, then nothing will be fixable. Not for you, not for whoever you hurt, not for their families or yours." Darius looked down at his partial closed right hand. "Everyone expects me to do this, to get revenge. Everyone except your grandmother, and me." Eleanor leaned forward. "Not every wound can be reversed, but how we respond to those wounds always matters." 2 years later, Eleanor sat in the audience of a community college graduation. When Darius's name was called, she stood and applauded as he crossed the stage, his right arm still held slightly awkwardly at his side. He had chosen respiratory therapy, a career where his injury wouldn't hinder his ability to help others. After the ceremony, he found her in the crowd. "Dr. Reyes," he said, giving her an awkward hug, "I almost didn't come today. I was thinking about how people look at my arm, how they'll look at it when I'm working with patients." "And," she prompted. "And then I remembered what you said, about fixing what can be fixed and facing what can't. I can't fix how my arm looks, but I can fix how I see myself, and how I help others see themselves." Eleanor thought about James Wilson, who had become an advocate for accessible public spaces, and about the other patients who had faced unfixable losses yet found ways to build lives of meaning. As she drove home that evening, the setting sun cast long shadows across the city. In her 2 decades of medical practice, she had learned that healing was rarely about reversing damage completely. More often, it was about identifying what was beyond repair, mourning it properly, and then redirecting energy toward what remained possible. The next morning, she would meet with a new patient, a young woman who had lost her leg in a car accident. Eleanor would tell her the truth, that she would never have her leg back. But she would also tell her another truth, that humans are remarkably adaptable creatures, capable of finding new paths when old ones are blocked. Not everything broken could be mended. Not every wound could heal without a scar. But truth facing reality exactly as it was, without false comfort or despair, truth always mattered. It was the only foundation solid enough to build a real future upon.